Welcome to the first TNH Roundup. My name is Josh Morrill. I'm the executive editor at the New Hampshire, and I am joined by...
My name is Anna Kate Muncie, and I'm the managing editor.
I'm Hannah Donahue, and I'm the content editor.
And we are super excited to launch this podcast because, especially in these, confusing times and challenging times for sure, we want to bring clarity to you guys, to the Seacoast community, UNH community, and everyone involved and everyone affected. So hopefully we can do that for you. And we're going to basically run down the main issues and events from every week. And this week we have 4 or 5. And the first one we have is the informed consent agreement, which was sent out by UNH this past week. And the statement that they came out with was the University of New Hampshire is looking forward to welcoming students, faculty, and staff back to our campuses for in-person instruction. We will need the help, cooperation, and participation of you and every other member of our university community to maintain a reasonably healthy and safe environment. And they basically went on to explain certain aspects of what we need to adhere as students and basically save their behinds so they don't get sued if we do something wrong. So we're just going to run down the basic things that they mentioned. And one big thing that should be taken from this is that there's a lot of vague aspects of it and a lot of things to still be answered and a lot of questions that need to be asked to the higher ups at UNH. So basically, the basics were wearing masks in public and common areas and stuff like that. And you have to avoid social gatherings above 10 people and washing your hands and doing all that stuff. But where it started to get a little hazy was when they mentioned you have to get your own test done before you get to school. And they never put a time frame on this. And basically, you just need to show that you were negative at some point over the summer, unless they come up with a date before then. But what are your guys' thoughts on that part?
They haven't really given anybody any information on who we're reporting these results to, how far in advance they need to be. But I'm assuming that, a lot of stuff is unknown right now. They're eventually going to come out with this information for students and really be transparent. A lot of stuff is unknown right now, so it's really difficult to communicate that with students, especially when things are changing so quickly. So I think that in the coming weeks, we'll be able to see, they'll roll out more information, more specifics to what's going to happen.
Totally agree with you, Hannah. And I think besides the pre-arrival testing, another big topic of conversation from the form was the part regarding tuition. So basically, the university kind of explained that tuition will remain the same regardless of whether classes follow the pattern that's been proposed, whether everyone goes remote at some point, tuition will remain the same. And it didn't mention potential refunds regarding housing or meal plan or anything like that as we got in the spring, so that's still unknown. But several people wrote letters and petitions kind of have been circulating around social media. One petition on change.org by someone named Via D'Agostino. She's an MFA student at UNH in the writing program. So she started this petition, and I got to talk to her a little bit about it, and here's what she said. When I first started reading the informed consent agreement, it all sounded perfectly logical. Wear a mask, maintain distance wherever possible, all the recommended guidelines. But as I kept reading, I realized that UNH isn't just asking us to agree to take precautions. They're asking us to forfeit our right to safe learning conditions, to give up any and all say in how this semester is going to work. More than that, they're not even really giving us a choice in whether we sign the agreement or not, since failure to do so may result in expulsion. When I saw the part about tuition remaining the same regardless of the way learning is conducted, either in person or online, I knew I had to do something. That's why I started the petition and why I'm encouraging everyone, even people who aren't students or UNH affiliated at all, to sign. All our voices need to be heard, and I wanted to give people a way to speak out and unite. The only way to get through this pandemic is by working together, and UNH needs to be reminded of that. So again, this is just one perspective, but this is a petition. It had gained about 77 of the desired 100 signatures. Obviously, this announcement was very recent, so was the petition, but it's just one student perspective we've seen on that aspect.
Yeah, and another interesting aspect is that you need to get, or you'll be subject to additional periodic testing, but they never said how that will go about. What is periodic? Is that weekly, bi-weekly, whenever they feel like it? Stuff like this needs to be clarified for students, because if you just go to school and they pick you up off the street and you're like, oh, you're getting tested, this isn't a very effective solution. And I think if you get screened every time you go into class, like that's not realistic. If you get screened or tested once a week, maybe, but I don't know if they have the resources to do this every week or bi-weekly. And with students coming in from all over New England, all over the country, it's really alarming.
They've also announced contact tracing throughout campus, so there will be a contact tracing format throughout the semester. They have yet to announce how that's going to be run, whether it will be run through the UNH mobile app, or if there will be some sort of way to do that. But in addition to the regular testing, they announced that President Dean announced that the lab is going to be running 24/7, processing these coronavirus test results and alerting students to what their results may be. When he announced it was a lab, he didn't specify whether it was going to be the state lab or the health and wellness lab, or whatever lab that may be. So it really kind of makes you wonder. He said it'll be running 24/7. That's a lot of work for people. So you want to make sure that they are getting the proper staffing and that there is going to be a good format to how this is going to run. So really, we're just looking for specifics. All students are looking for specifics at this point to see how this is going to run throughout the semester.
And just it's worth noting that this letter, or the email with this agreement that students are to sign, was sent out on Friday, July 17th, and it is due back this Friday, July 24th. So like we've been saying, we kind of have a lot of questions and there isn't a whole lot of time to get answers, but Dean did say to contact the president's office with any questions. So.
Yes. One thing I was really confused about, or was intrigued about, that they said was that we might need to, I don't know if it was on the conformance agreement, consent agreement, but they said we might need to download tracing apps on our phones, and kind of that's it. They might trace us that way to see how we're spreading, or if we do spread. But if people don't have access to stuff like that, most people have phones these days, but if someone doesn't, like it could wreck like the whole chain of people, and the whole idea of isolation too. If someone does get it, like they'll get put in the Adams Tower or something like that for 10 days. But what if there's overflow? What if there's staff that get it? What is the protocol for them? What if people in health and wellness get it? Like, are they not going to have enough staff to support the plans that UNH has? So there's a lot of questions to be answered, and certainly before we go back, they need to be answered.
I think that in a lot of these scenarios, we're running into a lot of those what ifs where only time will tell. And as we get closer to the semester beginning, which students are moving in less than a month now, because they are doing that phased move-in over the course of 3 weeks, beginning August 10th for on-campus residents. So they really need to start rolling out these specifics and addressing those what ifs. But again, only time will tell with some of these and what's going to happen and where the country is at, come August 31st on the first day of classes.
Yeah, so basically the whole point of this informed consent agreement was to cover the UNH's backsides, which is they need to do it, obviously, so they don't get sued. So there's no fault for them publishing it, but they definitely need to give more insight into how this process is going to go, because students can't go back confused. Like, if that happens, then this isn't going to go well. And UNH is very ambitious for doing this because a bunch of schools aren't even trying, especially with a school of our size. So we'll see. Like Hannah said, we'll have to wait and see on a lot of this. You guys have anything else to add on this? No?
I think so.
We'll head into the university's plans for the first couple weeks and how health and wellness is going to work and how housing and different aspects are going to work. So as far as health and wellness, on all of the information is on unh.edu. So if you want to go look, it's on there. And basically, a lot of the stuff is like health counseling, wellness coaching, psych evals, different stuff like that. It's all available to students by appointment, and it can be virtual as well. So some of the Living Well services are virtual. And basically going in there, like physically going into health and wellness is going to be like going in the grocery store where there's arrows pointing you where to go. If you have COVID symptoms, you're going to go to a different place than people who are injured. It's going to be a pretty elaborate setup in there. You can't just walk in. You're going to also get your temperature taken. You're going to get screened. So it's not going to just be like it was before, obviously. One question I had on this was not particularly on health and wellness, but it pertains to them, is how the testing is going to actually be done, like the testing itself. Because there's a lot of different ways. Like there's been the swab up the nose, there's been the spit test. I'd really like to know how that's going to be done, because some tests need to be sent to labs in different states. Some tests can be done right there. So I don't know what you guys' thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I feel like throughout this whole process of the coronavirus, I've had a lot of questions about testing. I have a lot of questions about how colleges are going to periodically test, which seems to be the most logical way to do that. But are students going to quarantine while they wait for their results? Because otherwise, you have no idea when the coronavirus is spreading. You have no idea if it spreads the day after someone gets tested and then they get the results and then they say they're fine. So I'm not exactly sure how universities can do that. I know some very small universities are testing students as soon as they get to campus and having them quarantine for the 3 or 4 days, but that seems pretty unlikely in a school of our size. So I guess I'm wondering how that will go overall.
Yeah, I'm wondering kind of the same thing, how they're planning on, making sure that every student is adhering to all of the guidelines. At a almost 16,000 person university, it's going to be difficult to, mandate each student and make sure that they are always reporting their results. So unless they have some sort of tracking system that they are producing to show, this student submitted their result on this day, which means they have to be tested again on this day in the future. So I'm just kind of thinking, if they plan on bringing it out, how are they going to roll that out and make that mandated? And how is that going to change how the community works and how students are going to be going through their everyday academic life?
And that's going to bring about a huge situation where maybe they'll have a hotline that you can call if you see someone not adhering to certain things, and it becomes a he said, she said, and maybe you do it over an app or something like that. But it's going to be really tough to get everyone to follow suit and adhere to all these guidelines, because believe it or not, all college kids don't like to follow the rules. So this is definitely going to be a tough situation for UNH. it's going to be interesting to see how they do that, because keeping track of everyone is one thing, but getting everyone to do the right thing in the first place is another. So we'll have to see how that shakes out. But yeah, as far as housing goes, there's only going to be doubles and singles, and like we said, Adams Tower for now is going to be the designated quarantine area. I'm sure it might expand. We don't know. But there's going to be a staggered move-in as well. You have to submit a negative test to go. There's only going to be 2 people, 2 family members, I think it said, per person to move you in, and they have to get screened as well. And it's going to be staggered like the move-out situation was at the end of last semester. So yeah, I think one of my big questions on housing was RAs and CAs, the training that they're going to get, because a lot of these RAs and CAs are just there to get the housing costs covered, and they're just there to be there, kind of. And a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are there to help people out, and they want to do their job well. But I'm really interested to see the training that they're going to get, because it's going to affect all the students, because they're basically the ones that are going to be hands-on and teaching them and kind of telling them how their life is going to be within the dorms. So
it's absolutely, I feel like for RAs and CAs this year, it's such an extra layer of responsibility. I think I've always admired RAs so much. I think it's probably such a hard job. But then thinking about this year, how you have to be thinking about not only all of the typical things, but then all of these new guidelines that are constantly evolving from the state and the federal level, from every level. And I can't imagine how difficult that will be for them. So I'm also curious how they'll be trained.
Yeah, and they're students as well. It's not like they're above learning. Like they're going to need a ton of training on this, because they're just like us, and it's going to be a learning process for sure.
Something that I only just thought of right now is what's going to happen for students who are in positions like RAs or CAs who become infected. If that were to happen, who is going to take that position and go through that? But to any students who are incoming freshmen, RAs, CAs, we want to hear your thoughts. You can email those to tnhstaff@gmail.com, and we'll be willing to hear you out and see, what is this environment going to be like? Any thoughts and concerns or contributions that you may have?
Yeah, and that's a huge part of starting your college career, is the social aspect in dorms. And if you can't go out into the common areas or the lounges and talk to people in groups, and you have to stay in your rooms, or there's certain guidelines you have to follow where you can only talk to people at certain times, it's going to be tough for incoming students that don't already have a core group of friends or stuff like that. And I feel for them. And even incoming kids, like, if they don't have that social aspect, like why are we at college? Like, other than the in-person schooling and the in-person instruction, like, half of college is the social life. So the is it worth it question, is it worth it for UNH to go through all this to not really get the full college experience? I think is a valid question, and some people need to ask that to themselves. If they can get all online instruction, then I don't see why they would want to go through all this. So maybe different in a month. We'll have to see. But I've definitely asked myself that question.
Something interesting when it comes to that also is, incoming freshmen and sophomores are trying to knock out their gen eds in those first 2 years, where those classes are the largest, and which means that a lot of those larger classes are online. I've seen and heard students who have, 3 to even 4, like all of their classes online. And I know a lot of, incoming parents, they don't want to see that happen with their first year, but that's just the way that this is going to have to be if we want to be able to continue our education through this pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. As far as the UNH's plans for the first few weeks, like I said, they're having a staggered move-in, and they're talking about that social aspect, and they're implementing community building activities to ensure physical distancing. I'd be intrigued to see what those are. And it says they want to take advantage of fire pits, hammocks, Adirondack chairs, and slack lines. I don't know if they're going to put those up, or I don't know what they mean by that, because that's your only way to have a social life is to have.
I believe they're designating more spots on campus to those like fire pits and s'more stations and Adirondack chairs, and I think they're like making more spaces for hammocking as well, to make sure that students still have that social aspect of campus. But like you said, is that really the full experience?
Yeah.
I think the social piece is something that kind of gets lost when between cable news and local news, and there's my family, friends, everyone. The focus is, are you going to go back to school? How are they going to do classes? But like you mentioned, Josh, such a huge part of why people go to college, especially a big college like UNH, is to get this social experience. And I'm not trying to say I think it's going to be typical. I think we have to be cautious, obviously, but I think there needs to be some work done on how we can create these social experiences for students, because it's such a huge part of their experience. And I would hate to see all of these students come to campus to sit in their dorms and do online classes and then go home at Thanksgiving. I think that would be almost tragic. I think it'd be very sad. So I think we should definitely work on coming up with some ways to socialize safely.
Yeah. And I think that could affect, like, if students come back next year or next semester even, if they don't have a very good experience this first semester, it's going to be interesting to see how many decide to actually come back and want to go through it again. Because it's tough enough to go to college not knowing anyone normally, but going through it this semester, I'm sure, is going to be even worse. So, we'll see about
I think that really expresses that collaborative effort that needs to come through between students and administration. UNH has done a really great job so far of hosting the Zoom town halls, and it's like showing like where they're at with their progress. While it might not always be the most transparent, they're still trying to communicate their best with what they have. But I think what's going to be extremely important in the coming weeks of going back to classes is student communication and hearing what students have to say, not just saying, hey, you guys can email us and we'll read your emails and we'll respond and say, this is the way it has to be. Really hearing students out and making sure that there is a collaborative effort and saying the reasoning for everything that's happening, more than, oh, we're in a pandemic. Explain, here's why we need to be social distant while doing this activity. Here's why we need to be able to set up these designated areas for socialization. Here's why classes are down capacities for each classroom. Here's why your class is online, not just putting the class online without explanation.
Yeah. And the UNH administrative staff, I'm sure, has put in tons and tons of hours on how they can do this the best way that they can. But if it's just them cooped up in a room trying to think of this, it's not going to go well, because they need to get, like you said, a collaborative effort going and get everyone's perspectives. And I think once we come back, it'll probably be that way. I think health obviously is the number one objective here, and not social life. But it's just a talking point, because staying healthy is going to be tough either way. So if we're going to make the effort to come back, then why are we going and putting ourselves in danger if there's not going to be a reward or a social life to go to, you know? So we'll see. You guys have anything to add on their plans for the first couple of weeks? No? All right.
I really just trust like what they're doing, that they do have our best interest despite, you know, everything that's going on. I think that it would just be nice for all students to see that collaborative effort coming to light.
Yeah. Maybe they can make a platform for that, or a website the students can go to, or Facebook or whatever. I think they probably will, because they've gotten a bunch of feedback in the last couple of weeks. So I'm sure that they'll come up with something. They're pretty proactive with stuff like that. So on to the next. UNH basically, I think it was 2 days before they sent out the informed consent agreement. I think it was the 15th. Basically, it was a survey saying, let me pull it out. It says, if it were possible for you to take all of your courses online, would you prefer to remain at home or take your courses remotely in the fall of 2020? There are options to press this in yes, no, and not sure at this time. So this is really confusing to me, because they're putting in all this effort for us to go back, and they got some backlash from some of the stuff that they're putting out. The timeline doesn't match up. So I don't think that they were putting this out because they got the backlash because they sent it before. They sent out the informed consent agreement. I just thought it was confusing, because obviously probably some people will stay home, but why are they going through all this effort if they're given the option to stay home? I mean, obviously they have to, but the way I took it was, like, would you want to just not do this at all? I don't know, maybe you guys looked at it differently, but
I just felt like, I agree with you. I felt like it was a bit confusing, and I felt like this survey could have been a time where there could be kind of more questions about different potential scenarios, maybe some areas for open-ended answers from students, because it's not as though it's going to be everyone stays at home and does online classes, or everyone is on campus and everyone takes classes in person. We all know neither of those things are probably going to be reality. So I wish there was maybe some different scenarios laid out, some areas for feedback, because I think this is a good opportunity from the university, because a simple survey will get more students to respond. But I felt like it was almost a missed opportunity where a lot of information could have been gathered, and it was just the one question. But maybe there will be more surveys to come, so I don't want to jump the gun there.
I completely agree with that. I think another thing that really comes into play with that is, I think the timing was just a little bit off. It came out of nowhere. There wasn't much explanation that came with the survey. It was really, hey, would you feel comfortable coming back right now? But, you know, that's another thing. It's the timing. We don't know what the world is going to be like when we go back to classes. So right now, like, I'm not entirely sure if I'd even be comfortable going back right now with where cases are on the rise across the country. As for, you know, what's it going to be like the day classes start? Are cases going to be even higher? Are we going to be on a downturn? And, you know, again, that's another thing where it's just, time will only tell. But I think that I think it was a good idea to survey students and see how they're feeling. But as for the timing, when it's right, when cases are starting to ramp back up, that I was a little bit confused, and where it was just a little bit off for me.
yeah. An interesting aspect to that is the actual stats of how the coronavirus is affecting New Hampshire. And I think they just came out with an article, I think it was on Yahoo. They said that there's 26 new cases last week. They published it the 17th. And I think I got the numbers right here. It says there's 6,165 total cases in New Hampshire since the pandemic started, and 5,188 have recovered. That's a 16% mortality rate, which is way higher than the national 1 to 2%.